The tech's always hard to set up, right? It never works when you're supposed to. So what I'm going to talk about today, I'm an informatics professor. As she said, I've been teaching for about 10 years. So I see students, they're 18 to 22. I also have a 9-year-old. He's almost 10. He's in 3rd grade. And I've been thinking a lot lately about what I want him to know before he is in the class of 2032, good Lord. So that's what I've been thinking about lately. So I decided to talk to you about this today. And the thing is that the thing is that when we're little, we have these books, and they're picture books, because we don't know how to read yet. Parents are reading to us. We're learning that the words are associated with sounds and with meaning, and that's beautiful. We have these lovely, beautiful illustrated books, 75 to 100% illustration, right? And some of them, it's not just that there's a story in the words, but that there's a sub-story in the images, right? This one's called Goodnight Gorilla. And the zookeeper is walking through, looking at all the animals, making sure they're in their cages, and he says goodnight to them. So the text is that he's saying goodnight, and then he's going to lock up the zoo and go to bed. But the sneaky, clever gorilla steals the keys. Plus, also, subplot, there is a balloon and a moon on every page if you can find them. So a little bit of gamification there, right? So the gorilla steals things, and he lets all the other zoo animals out. The zookeeper continues to say goodnight, and he eventually goes back to his house. They're all sneakily crawling up behind him, and the gorilla ends up between the zookeeper and his wife. And so there's this plot that is led by the text, but the subplot by the visuals is that you should, when your mom kisses you goodnight, you should pretend to be asleep, sneak out, and go crawl in her bed, right? This is what my son learned anyway. So the visuals tell a different story in this case, and they tell a story in a strong, graphic way that we kind of start to lose the older we get. So by 3rd grade or so, your books are maybe half text. The pictures are there, but they're being slowly supplanted by the text and by the story. And then at that point, we're in reading groups. We're reading chapter books. We're put into reading groups at class. There's testing done at the 3rd grade level at the state for reading comprehension, right? And by the time you get to be in elementary school, you start to read chapter books. And there's still graphics on some pages. There's still graphics at the top of the chapters, maybe. The illustrations on the covers tell you about the story. But it's really much more about learning and understanding the words. So by the time we're adults, it's all text for us, right? And it may look more like work than pleasure at this point, or it may be electronic or on a computer instead of in a book. But we don't really have a lot of graphics that we're reading in our stories. But at the same time, we have these visuals that are driving online communication, right? There's emoticons that we're talking with. There's Snapchat where we just send pictures. Everything that's story online that they want us to click on probably has an image. So at the New York Times, I have a friend there who was the youngest graphic designer that they've ever hired. And he came to IU and he spoke about how when in the old days of printed newspapers, right, you would finish your story, you'd submit it, and you'd be done. But nowadays, that's only halfway through. Then you have to pick, well, what image is going to go on the social media? What's the tagline going to be on Twitter? What time do I want to release this for a global audience, right? It's become more complex and more diverse, but it's also very visually driven. And, that's not even talking about the advertising. Children are advertised to just like we are. And instead of just saying, hey, intellectually, this is the best product, we're sold an emotion, right? It taps into our heart. So we're sold happiness. Coca-Cola is happiness in your mouth. Literally in Chinese, that's the translation for Coca-Cola. We're sold luxury lifestyles. We're sold experiences. We want to look cool and hip and be just like those people that we see in the commercials. And that's not even to mention the product placement, right? I mean, it's very pervasive. And if kids are going to not fall for some of the tricks that we have now, because everything is so branded, right? They need to start by asking questions. And so that's what I think the first thing children need to learn is that you need to ask questions about the visuals you see, not just about the stories you read and examine in school, but about the designs and the look of the website, the look of that video, the look of the advertisement that you've watched. what is the purpose of it? Who created it, and why did they create it for you? The second thing is that, we don't want to be tricked, right? And apparently, Benjamin Franklin said this quote, right? And we tend to believe things where text and images are joined together. And John Oliver thought this was so hilarious, he created a whole website of fake quotes. He thought this was a hilarious thing, but it's true. We look up a quote online, it's got a picture next to it. Who are we to not believe it, right? And it's hard. It is hard for even the best of us and the most digital savvy of us to tell what's real. These are faces generated by a computer graphic program, and they look real. How are you supposed to tell what's real and fake? So kids are looking up things on the internet just like we are, right? And for school projects, that's what they do. They Google just like we do. And I think this gets, this gets to the point of it because, you can't always tell. Now, we are, as savvy adults, probably can recognize that the one on the right is probably a real site and the one on the left is probably not real. Also, I can read the text and see that the main predator of the octopus is the Sasquatch, and that kind of makes me think, well, maybe that one's not really real. But there are tools out there that we could be teaching in schools. For example, just doing a reverse image search will tell you in the second listing that this is a hoax, right? But knowing to do that next step is not something I think that we always get lucky enough to have a teacher who shares that wisdom with us. I certainly see college students coming in with not really an idea about how to go about this. We could be teaching that sooner. Oh, it's not loading the videos, so let me just show you what I want to show you. So what I want to show you is that there are folks out there who are doing cool things. Like, here's this guy. He's a videographer, he was a New York Times reporter, and he decided that kids need to have better ways to understand what's real and fake. So what he did is he created this YouTube channel, and we'll just watch the first minute of it if I can get it to load. All right, here we go.
Hey, is this rat really taking a shower and soaping itself up like a human might do? Or is this some kind of prank trying to make fools of us all? I just might have the answer to that one, plus answers to a whole bunch of mind-bending stuff that you guys sent in. Like this creepy creature from the deep blue sea, a picture claiming this half lion and half leopard is a real animal, a photo of a supposedly real albino giraffe, and that doesn't even include the big story this week about that legendary creature known as the chupacabra. Is there any way this could be real? Hey guys, Bill here. We've covered all sorts of creepy creatures here on Real or Fake, but I gotta tell you, the one that really gives me the goosebumps is the chupacabra.
Pictures show a hairless dead animal.
So anyway, he goes through and he takes photos, videos, whatever students send him, whatever kids send him, and he's got these whole teams of researchers. He gives them kind of fun names, and they go through, well, how did we figure out whether this was real or fake? Or is it partially true, which is really hard, right? This is why it's so easy to spread misinformation, because things sometimes are partially true or they rely on a stereotype. And so this is fantastic that someone's out there doing this, but at the same time, though, there's the video, there's also so much information out there, and being able to kind of tell, am I being tricked, is an important skill. So the second thing I want students to know, and what I think we should be teaching, and I know some of you are young and you're like, I don't have kids, I'm not teaching anyone. Just wait. You will eventually be in a position where you're mentoring or you're teaching, or you give up being a graphic designer and you go full-time as a professor. And if you want to do that, you come talk to me, okay? All right, so what I want to do is think about, well, okay, really. So basically designers, and this is a picture of it's not loading, is it? It's a picture of two paths. One is for designers and one's for user experience. Because as we know, sometimes the best intentions in design don't really end up with the best user experience. That's why we have the field of UX now, right? And one of the best examples, I think, is of the curbs, right, in sidewalks, because until the 40s or 50s, there weren't these cutouts so that you could get down to the street level. And in 1945, a man in Michigan, he said, okay, I'm going to fight this. And he got them to make a law that all new sidewalks had to have these cutouts. In fact, there was a team of people that went around with a jackhammer and like hammered out the sidewalks so that they'd have to go fix them and put in the curbs. But when they put in these curb cuts, what they found out is that by making it accessible for people in wheelchairs, it helped older people with mobility issues. It helped kids on bikes. It helped parents with strollers, and that it was a good thing for everyone. And you know what? I tend to actually use the captions a lot, and a lot of people do now. And I think that the reason is that we're distracted, right? My little boy wants to play Battle Cats at top volume, but he also wants to snuggle. So, you know, if I'm going to watch anything, I probably have the captions on. Things that are good for some of your users are probably good for all of them. So I think beauty and function is something that we can't ignore, that pairing. Here's a lamp that also is a plug, and here's the mythical women's clothing that has pockets. Good designs are helpful. They help people. They can be designed to be functional and beautiful. And starting to understand which one the design is for and whether it's for both is, I think, important. And then, you know, kids like to come up with their own ideas too. So maybe we lead this towards, well, what would you do? How would you design something to make it better? So good designs also, if you're going to learn to evaluate and analyze design, and evaluate means to, you know, to compare and contrast to make a judgment call. Analyze means you break it into those pieces and you look at them individually. You do start to need to know those principles of design. And I think that, you know, even though there are a million principles of design we could teach, starting with basics, things like what's the same, what's different, how are we organizing this, what's the focus, could be a way that we could teach students design without necessarily going down a traditional graphic design path. So really the point here is that in traditional education, we tend to teach students that there are answers. There are answers to their tests that they take. There's answers to what they're asked in class for math classes, etc. And that's not really what we want for the 21st century. What we want is people asking questions, especially in design. Really? Oh, it's going to come up, I think. Oh, the internet, you are so slow. Well, skip it.
That's not the way you're supposed to do it, Dad. They want us to do it this way.
I don't know that way. Why would they change math? Math is math.
Okay,
Math
Dad.
is math.
And so they have, to some extent, some math has changed. There are new, more visual ways to teach math, ways that allow you to think about it from multiple perspectives, including a visual one. And, you know, this is important because we want to teach students to program now, right? This is another one of these computational thinking is a 21st century skill. MIT invented this program called Scratch, and each one of those little blocks does something different in the code, and it's a different color and a different shape, and they fit together. So it's very visual, it's very easy to teach the concepts without getting caught up in the syntax. So there are some changes happening, but I think it's kind of whether you're lucky or not, right? And it shouldn't just be something that you come into college and then you can take a class in it if you're interested. I feel like visual literacy is something we need to teach as well. Not just literacy, but also visual literacy. And, you know, because we're all going to fail sometimes. You know, we're going to try to make a point with our aunt online, and we send her a link from 2003, and then we have to apologize. I mean, we're going to make mistakes. Kids are too. But let's try to teach them how to ask better questions. So as the adventurous and wonderful Amelia Earhart said, the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who can read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn, right? Those are the illiterate ones. Learning and then relearning. And guess what? That wasn't by Amelia Earhart. It was by Alvin Toffler. I want to thank Zoe. Zoe March Simon. She is my research assistant. She put together some support material for you afterwards. And thank you very much.